The initial idea for Project Hail Mary is actually, it's like 5 or 6 unrelated ideas that I had for books that were in my kind of mental ideas file. And then over time, I kind of glued them together and sanded off the edges, and it turned into Project Hail Mary. But I originally had an idea for a story about an astronaut who wakes up on a spaceship with amnesia. I had another idea for a first contact story. Then a completely unrelated idea for a story about what if we had a mass conversion based fuel. Bit by bit, those all came together and became Project Hail Mary. My elevator pitch for Project Hail Mary would be that it's a buddy movie with world-shattering consequences. Ryland Grace is a middle school teacher. He's a very gifted scientist, but one who got kind of drummed out of his field by having unpopular opinions that turned out maybe they're true. Well, coming up with Ryland was a real challenge for me because this is the first time I wrote a book where the main character wasn't just based on me. My earlier books, the main characters are based on aspects of my own personality, but Ryland I created from whole cloth. So I'm always trying to grow as an author. And so for Ryland, I came up with his core personality is he's very conflict averse. He doesn't like being challenged too much. That's why he ultimately left academia to become a really popular middle school teacher. Well, my whole shtick is using accurate science in my stories. And yeah, the biggest challenge of that is explaining it to people who might not understand it or might not even care about it. So I put a lot of work into that. And what I do is I first off say, what is the absolute minimum amount of information I need to give the reader? I don't need to go, just because this stuff is really interesting to me doesn't mean it's interesting to the reader. So I give them the bare minimum information they need just to understand the events of the plot. Then I describe it, usually with some humor, because people will swallow any pill if it's coated in a nice sugary layer of humor. So they'll take any amount of exposition if you're making them laugh. And then the other thing is, and this is the best part, I love it when I hear this from readers, is they say, like, well, it got into sort of a scientific, explanation, and my eyes glazed over a little bit, and I just kind of skimmed until it got back to the plot. Other writers might be kind of offended at that. They're like, oh, I want you to read every word I write. But for me, that is awesome. That means the reader has so much confidence in me that they just assume I'm accurate on all of that science. That their suspension of disbelief is rock solid on that. They don't need it explained to them. They're like, yeah, sure, okay, I believe it, And so when you get to that point with a reader, you're golden. Drew's an awesome guy to work with. I didn't have that much to do with making the screenplay, so he pretty much did it on his own. I had complete confidence because I'd seen what he did with The Martian. Once he had a rev, he sent it for notes. We all gave notes, myself included. He would call me once in a while he was working on the screenplay to ask for clarifications or on the science or on character, concepts. But for the most part, he just took care of it himself. He's very good at that. I couldn't have asked for a better portrayal of Ryland on screen than Ryan. It's amazing. He did such a fantastic job. He brought layers to the character that I didn't even put into him. My biggest challenge in writing is creating characters with depth and complexity and nuance. And I do my best, but I still have a way to go with that. Ryan took what I began with Ryland and ran with it and made Ryland a deep and complicated and really great character. So what's awesome is all the work Ryan did to make Ryland such a good character, I'm going to get credit for, even though Ryan was the one who did the work. But that's fine with me. Sandra absolutely nailed Strat as a character, all the way down, not just to the way she acted, but the nuance and the vocal inflection that I imagined. I did have some specific ideas for how Strat spoke, how thick her accent was, what sorts of intonations she would put on words. And I never talked to Sandra about it, but she just went straight to that. And so it was absolutely perfect as far as I'm concerned. The sets were amazing, and I saw the Hail Mary, and I thought, wow, okay. So of course, in the studio, unlike within the context of the story, it's all just one big ship. In the studio, they're broken up into, okay, here's the cockpit over here, here's the tunnel over there, there's the bedrooms over there. So it was kind of, here's the lab, and it was kind of interesting going around trying to figure out, okay, wait, how does this connect to that? So it was hard for me on the soundstage to figure out what the geometry of the whole ship was. But each individual room, I'm like, wow, this looks great. This looks fantastic. I especially love the cockpit. I'm a sucker for lots of blinking lights and GAC. Phil and Chris did an incredible job. I've loved everything they've made. And wow, just watching them work on this project, they were always saying like, Jesus, this is hard. This is the hardest movie we've ever had to make. But to me, this was the only time I've ever seen them work, as on a project that I was on. And I was like, wow, it seems like they're handling it just fine. So I don't know. I imagine it was very difficult for them. It was a large and complicated shoot. But they, from an external observer's perspective, they just handled everything so beautifully. Well, after they see the movie, I just hope that the audiences feel good. I never have a message. I never have a moral. I'm not trying to change anybody's belief on anything. I just want to entertain. And I admit I'm a bit of a, pie in the sky, head in the clouds optimist. I really do think humanity is a pretty cool thing. And so I'd like people to come out of there feeling like good about humanity or good about the world. Maybe just a little bit. I'm so happy with the way things have turned out. Obviously, I I'm really glad that people like the book so much, and I really think they're going to love the movie. I think it's going to be a big hit, and yeah, I hope it becomes kind of part of the zeitgeist for a little while, where people talk about it or have running jokes. I look forward to memes.